Father, a preacher who masked his ab-sive behavior, lost his grip when my siblings and I orchestrated our mother's escape. I have 3 siblings, Rachel, 22, Martin, 18, and Mandy, 17. I moved out when I was 18, eager to carve out my own space and find peace. Rachel left home at 19, while Martin just moved out this past spring. Rachel and Martin have their own apartments now, and both decided to live near our extended family in Kentucky, a good 2 hours away from where we grew up in Tennessee. Meanwhile, my husband and I started our lives together in Florida. Looking back, I realize I didn't always see my dad as abusive. As a kid, it was easy to brush off the incidents, a shove here, a raised fist there. He did punch my brother in the face once, but that was after I moved out, so at the time, I convinced myself those moments weren't patterns, but rare explosions. No broken bones or burned skin, nothing truly horrific, at least, nothing you could see at first glance, but underneath it all, his temper was a constant storm, and his words cut deeper than any hit ever could. Growing up, I thought that was just how families functioned. I didn't realize the gravity of the emotional abuse. My mom bore the brunt of it. She left school in the 8th grade and tried, many times, to get her GED. Every time she'd start, a hopeful spark in her eyes, he'd nip it in the bud. You'll never finish. Why bother? You never stick to anything anyway. Each attempt fizzled out under the weight of his disdain. The same thing happened with her attempts at weight loss. After each pregnancy, she struggled, but every diet, every workout, became another failure for him to ridicule. You'll just give up. You're too stupid to see anything through. He'd mock her intelligence whenever he could, calling her dumb, incapable of holding a job. Most of my childhood, Mom worked odd jobs when money was tight, but for the most part, she was a stay-at-home mom. Now, with only Mandy left at home, she works full-time. Everything I've said so far was always behind closed doors. Nobody outside the family could ever suspect a thing. In public, Dad was the picture-perfect father, the loving Christian leader. He's been a preacher longer than my parents have known each other, and a youth pastor for 15 years. At church and school, my parents look like everyone's dream couple. I tried to explain all of this to my husband. It's hard for him to imagine, because my dad hides the monster so well. But there are certain things you just can't forget. Like the time my parents bought Martin a weight bench set for Christmas. After a heated argument, Dad hurled the whole thing out into the yard, weights, bench, everything. No one was allowed to bring them in until morning. By then, the dew had settled, metal was rusted, the whole set bent beyond repair. Martin never even got to use it. Or the time Martin started getting into ranching. He used his own savings, he's always been disciplined with money, and bought a small herd, 10, maybe 15 cows and a bull or 2. Dad agreed to let him use the property, but every argument turned into a threat. If Martin didn't fall in line, Dad would drive out and shoot all the cows. These weren't dairy cows, they were for beef, but Martin could never get them all to the butcher in time. The threat always hung over him, wasted money, dead animals, heartache for nothing. It didn't stop there. The night before my wedding, Dad asked if I was marrying my husband to get my Hispanic mother-in-law citizenship. We're white, by the way. That same evening, he leaned in and all but called me a whore, even though my husband was only the second boyfriend I'd ever had, and we waited until marriage for sex. That was as much personal conviction as religious doctrine. He once threatened to set Martin's truck on fire because, in a burst of teenage attitude, Martin talked back. He actually threatened to torch a vehicle Martin had paid for, had his name on the title, and insured himself. How would that have looked in court for dear old Dad? He regularly threatened to lock my mom's phone line whenever they fought, because, conveniently, they shared an account. At one point, he even accused her of cheating when he couldn't log into her Twitter. It asked for a password, after all. In his mind, if there was a password to keep him out, there must be something to hide. Mom had surgery to remove fatty tumors years ago. Around that time, she told him she was leaving if things didn't change. His response? He said if she actually left, he hoped the tumors were cancer and would kill her. Who could possibly say that to their own wife when she's recovering from surgery? When Mandy decided to come visit me, my dad actually told her, in all seriousness, that if she got on that plane, he hoped she died in a plane crash. Who says something like that to their 17-year-old daughter? It all came to a head on July 28, 2022, a Thursday. My mom and Mandy packed their things and quietly left for Martin's apartment while Dad was at work. On the drive, Mom called him to say she was leaving, and when he asked if she was taking Mandy, she confirmed it. He didn't kick up much of a fuss, at least not directly. But then he involved the pastor and his wife. Mom had wanted to keep things quiet, to preserve his reputation as a preacher and leader. So at first, only Dad knew the real reason she was leaving. But once he dragged the pastor and his wife into it, Mom told them everything. His manipulative behavior, his addiction to pornography, the way he treated us, the way he belittled and controlled her. Still, they sided with him. The pastor's wife, who had been my childhood friend, looked Mom in the eye and insisted that staying and working it out was the only thing a good Christian wife would do. After all that, I find myself wondering how people can turn a blind eye to such darkness, even when the truth is staring them in the face. The events of that week completely soured my opinion of her. The three of them, my mother, Martin, and Mandy, drove out to Kentucky early that Saturday morning, preparing to meet with my mom in hopes of convincing her to return home. Strangely, my mom agreed to meet in person at first, but then changed her mind at the last moment and only spoke with them over the phone. They spent the long weekend at Martin's apartment, but my mom had to head back to Tennessee for work on Monday. She had already put in her 2 weeks' notice, but her official last day was today, August 5, 2022. I kept reminding her that working out her notice was just a courtesy, not a requirement, but she insisted. She said she needed every bit of that money to make her escape possible. Sperm donor, my dad, told her she could stay at the house with him until she finished, promising that they'd sleep in separate rooms, and that he wouldn't pressure her to move back in or anything. Despite the advice from all four of us kids and my husband, she didn't listen. She kept telling me she didn't have any friends close enough to let her stay. The alternatives, hotels or a 2-hour each-way daily drive to Martin's, would have eaten all her hard-earned money. Against all our advice, she returned to stay with him for that last week. The plan was simple enough. Mandy would fly here first. Then, once she landed in Florida, my husband would drive up to Kentucky, load up my mom and her things in a U-Haul, and bring her back. Sperm donor, for once, didn't put up a fight about Mandy leaving, but said he wanted to say goodbye to her. Martin agreed to drive her and my mom, who was already at the house, back to Tennessee, then he would take Mandy to the airport the next day. As soon as Mandy landed, my husband would retrieve my mom from Kentucky. That day, everything went sideways. My dad stole not only my mom's phone but Mandy's as well. In the middle of the night he sent a message from my mom's phone to our family group chat, saying that she didn't want to come to Florida anymore. All of us instantly knew it was a lie, not just because of the clumsy wording or refusal to explain the sudden change of heart, but because Mandy had been in touch with me and other family members the whole time. She ignored all attempts at clarification. The minute I saw that my dad had Mandy's phone, I panicked. Now he knew all the flight info, her name, birth date, everything. I realized he could try to cancel her flight. Thankfully, Mom had paid for it with a card Dad couldn't access, but I wasn't taking any chances. I called the airline and insisted they flag the reservation so only Mandy or I could cancel it. Meanwhile, Martin was determined to get Mandy to the airport, but my dad was no longer playing along. Now they had to sneak out. He paced the backyard on the phone with someone, our cars parked just out of sight. They waited, hearts racing, until he came in the back door. Then, as calmly and quietly as they could, they slipped out the front, circled the side of the house, got in Mom's car, and drove off. Here's what made that possible. My mom already knew and approved the plan. Martin's truck was running on fumes after the 2-hour drive and would have barely made it 10 minutes before needing a refill. Time was critical. They took Mom's car, fully in her name, financed by her, insured by her, all accounts current. As luck would have it, Mandy had forgotten her purse at Martin's apartment. Otherwise, Dad might have grabbed her ID too, and she wouldn't have been able to fly. The moment my dad realized what happened, he rang Martin and threatened to report the car stolen. Legally, he didn't stand a chance. Everything was in my mom's name. Had the cops been called, Martin only needed to put my mom on the line to confirm it wasn't stolen. Dad didn't threaten this, but Martin and Mandy worried Dad might try to report Mandy kidnapped, since she was under 18 and Martin over 18. I told Martin to lay the situation out for any authorities and insist they talk to my mom. Hopefully that would be enough. The main fear was any delay could cost Mandy her flight, so I made Martin swear to drive safely and avoid getting pulled over. They swung by Martin's apartment, grabbed Mandy's purse, made it to the airport. No issues. Martin even secured an escort pass to walk Mandy through security and all the way to the gate. Since she was still only a kid, she'd flown alone 2 times before, but it was never easy. Martin FaceTimed me so I could see Mandy off and work out how she'd reach me. Dad still had her phone, so we had to get creative. Mandy boarded the plane, caught her connection, and finally landed in Florida without a hitch. My husband met her at the airport and brought her safely home. Afterward, Martin had to double back to my parents' house in Tennessee. In their rush to spirit Mandy out, they'd left my mom's purse in the car. Martin also needed his truck. My mom planned to leave her car with sperm donor after all was said and done. During Martin's drive, a family phone call happened. My brother, my parents, all on speaker together. My dad, reading from Mandy's stolen phone, claimed Mandy sent texts saying she didn't want to go to Florida, that she felt forced. When Mandy borrowed a phone during her layover, she made it clear those weren't her words. The only thing Mandy had truly messaged was about hating the situation and having to leave, though she absolutely still wanted to come. My dad tried to twist Mandy's words, saying she could come if she wanted, but that my mom was forbidden to leave because the Bible says married couples have to stay together. I couldn't roll my eyes hard enough. Spoiler alert, it really doesn't say that. It doesn't mention separation at all. My mom has repeated, almost like a hope or a prayer, that she wishes this is only temporary. She keeps saying maybe this will finally be the wake-up call that'll make him get his act together. After that tense conversation with my parents, Martin called me. I told him straight out, Dad is absolutely not going to be happy about what you pulled off, getting Mandy to her flight. I admit, though, that I was actually insanely proud of Martin for making it happen. But knowing our dad's temper, I warned Martin that things might get ugly fast when he got to the house. I advised him to call the police ahead of time and ask for an officer to be on standby, but stay out of sight, just in case things got out of hand. They live in the middle of nowhere, so I worried the police might take too long if they were really needed. Honestly, I just hoped we wouldn't get to that point. Thankfully, Martin agreed and actually carried out my suggestion. When Martin got to the house, everything played out just as I expected. It was the same argument he and my dad already had over the phone. My dad was saying he wasn't going to let my mom leave. That she wasn't allowed to move here. The three of them, my brother and my mom, sitting side by side across from my dad. Somehow, my mom had managed to get her phone back at that point, and Martin quickly texted her something like, you want to leave? If so, it has to be right now. Go into the house, get your stuff together, and I'll take care of the rest. She slipped away to pack up her things, and Martin moved out of earshot of our dad before making the call. He told the cop waiting on standby to go ahead and come to the house. And just as we've seen 1,000 times before, when that officer showed up, my dad basically morphed into a completely different person. He's never the same around justice as he is when someone with authority is there. He shrinks, acts all submissive. He told the cop he never stopped my mom from leaving, that Martin was making things up, that he just didn't want her to go. The officer asked Martin to wait outside so she could talk to my parents in private. Once it was just my parents and the cop, my mom finally told her the truth, that Martin hadn't lied, that my dad had actually been furious, had said all those things. The officer stayed right there until my mom finished gathering her things, and then she personally escorted my mom off the property. On the way out, my dad told Martin that he wasn't welcome on the property anymore, and if he ever set foot there again, Dad would call the police and have him charged for trespassing. My mom gathered her things and went back to my dad's apartment, but even then, things weren't settled. He flat out refused to give Mandy's phone back, saying he paid for it, which made no sense since their finances were joined, but whatever, and that she couldn't keep anything he bought unless she stayed with him. Back at the apartment, Martin helped our mom book her flight to Florida. As soon as she boarded that plane, my dad started spinning new lies. I found out he went on Facebook and started telling everyone his version of events about the separation. He also posted a disgustingly sappy anniversary message, completely out of character for him, especially since my mom had already told him she was leaving. I mean, she told him on the 29th and her flight was on the 5th, which just happened to also be their anniversary. That post was so fake it made my skin crawl. I couldn't take it anymore, all the lying and manipulating. I decided I had to call him out in the family group chat. If I had any social media, I would have taken him to task right there on Facebook, but I don't, so that wasn't an option. My cousin saw what was going on, though, and commented on my dad's heartfelt post, explaining the real situation for everyone feeling sorry for my dad. Within 10 minutes, my dad deleted the comment and blocked him. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my last post, and holy shit, things have escalated in ways I never saw coming. I thought the worst was behind us when Mom finally made it to Florida, but I was so wrong. First, the good news, Mom has been doing amazing here. She's like a completely different person, laughing again, actually eating full meals, sleeping through the night. Mandy's thriving too. She enrolled in the local high school and already made friends. For the first time in years, our house feels peaceful. But sperm donor? He's completely lost his mind. It started small. He kept calling Mom's work in Tennessee, claiming she'd stolen company property. Total lies, but embarrassing enough that her former boss had to change their phone number. Then he started showing up at Martin's apartment in Kentucky at all hours, pounding on the door, demanding to know where his family was. Martin finally had to get a restraining order. But here's where it gets really fucked up. I found out why he was so desperate to keep Mom from leaving, and it has nothing to do with his twisted version of Christianity. My cousin Jake, the one who called Dad out on Facebook, reached out to me last week. Apparently, there's been rumors in their small Tennessee town for months. Dad's been having an affair with Sarah, the 24-year-old youth group leader. Jake said everyone at church knew but nobody wanted to say anything because, man of God and all that bullshit. The kicker? Sarah is pregnant. And she's been pressuring Dad to leave Mom and marry her. When I told Mom, she just stared at me for the longest time. Then she started laughing, not happy laughing, but that bitter, broken kind. She said it all made sense now. Why he'd been so determined to keep her from getting her GED, an educated wife might ask too many questions. Why he'd isolated her from friends. Why he'd fought so hard to stop her from leaving. He needed her to stay so he could play the devoted family man while screwing around on the side. But wait, it gets worse. Yesterday, Martin called me panicking. Apparently, Dad had been telling people at church that Mom abandoned the family to run off with another man, me. Yes, you read that right. He's been implying that Mom and I are having some kind of inappropriate relationship. I'm her daughter. The pastor's wife, the same one who told Mom to stay and work it out, has been spreading this disturbing rumor around town. Martin said people have been giving him weird looks and asking invasive questions about our family. I was so furious I could barely see straight. But Mom? Mom was done. She called Dad directly for the first time since she left. I was in the kitchen when she made the call, and I could hear him yelling through the phone from across the room. She stayed calm the entire time and told him exactly what she knew, about Sarah, about the pregnancy, about the lies he'd been spreading about our family. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then he started crying. Actually sobbing. Begging her to come back, saying Sarah meant nothing, that he'd made a mistake. He offered to break it off, to move to Florida with her, to go to counseling, anything. Mom's response? I'm filing for divorce on Monday. Your girlfriend can have you. She hung up and blocked his number. But of course, it didn't end there. This morning, we woke up to find my car's tires slashed and horse spray painted across my garage door. There's no proof it was him, but the timing is pretty fucking convenient. The cops took a report, and we installed security cameras. Mom's already talking to a lawyer about the divorce and about Dad's little slander campaign. Apparently, what he's been saying about us could be considered defamation. The weirdest part? I'm not even angry anymore. I'm relieved. All these years, I knew he was a monster, but I thought he was just a garden variety abuser. Finding out he's also a cheating hypocrite who got his side piece pregnant while terrorizing his family? It somehow makes everything clearer. Mom keeps apologizing for not leaving sooner, for exposing us to his toxicity for so long. I told her she has nothing to apologize for. She survived. We all did. And now she's free. Mandy asked me yesterday if I think Dad will try to get custody of her. I told her the truth. A man who told his daughter he hoped she'd die in a plane crash isn't going to win any custody battles. Especially not when his pregnant girlfriend is half his age and he's been spreading incestuous lies about his own family. I know this isn't over. Men like him don't just disappear quietly. But for the first time in my entire life, I'm not afraid of him anymore. He's just a pathetic middle-aged man who knocked up a girl barely older than his oldest daughter and destroyed his family in the process. The monster doesn't seem so scary when you finally see him in the light. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and Jesus Christ, I thought we'd hit rock bottom before, but apparently there's always another level of hell with this man. The divorce proceedings started smoothly enough. Mom's lawyer was confident. Adultery, emotional abuse, the works. Dad had been radio silent since that phone call where he broke down crying, and honestly, we were all starting to think maybe he'd finally accepted it was over. We were so fucking naive. 3 weeks ago, Sarah, the pregnant girlfriend, showed up at our door in Florida. At first, I thought Dad had sent her to try to manipulate Mom somehow. But when I saw her face, swollen and bruised, with a black eye that looked about a week old, I realized this wasn't some manipulation tactic. She was running from him too. Sarah told us everything. How the affair had been going on for 8 months, how he'd promised to leave Mom for her once she turned 25, because apparently even in his twisted mind, 24 was too young. How he'd convinced her that Mom was abusive to him, that he was trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who belittled him. Classic manipulation, make yourself the victim. But here's the kicker, Sarah isn't the only one. There was another girl before her, Emma, 22, also from the youth group. Dad had gotten her pregnant too, about 2 years ago. When she told him, he gave her money for an abortion and transferred her to a different church across the state. Emma had tried to reach out to other church members about what happened, but who's going to believe a troubled young woman over their beloved pastor? Sarah only found out about Emma when she got suspicious and started digging through Dad's computer. She found emails, photos, evidence of at least 3 other relationships with young women from various churches he served at. This has been going on for years. When Sarah confronted him about Emma, that's when he hit her. Not just once, she showed us photos of bruises up and down her arms, marks on her throat. She said he told her if she ever threatened to expose him, he'd make sure she disappeared and blame it on her mental health issues. The pregnancy was his way of keeping her quiet. He told her that if she left him or said anything, he'd claim she was an unstable woman who seduced a married pastor and was now trying to destroy his family with lies. He said no one would believe her over him. Sarah's been staying with us for 2 weeks now. Mom, despite everything, took her in. She said Sarah was just another one of his victims. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. I mean, this girl helped destroy my parents' marriage. But seeing her with Mandy, helping her with homework, making dinner. She's just a kid who got manipulated by a predator. And speaking of Mandy, she's been incredible through all this. She's the one who convinced Sarah to go to the police with her story. They filed a report last week, assault, rape. Sarah was 23 when it started, but Emma was 17, and potential charges related to his position of authority. But Dad must have gotten wind of it somehow, because that's when shit really hit the fan. Last Friday, Martin called me in a panic. Dad had shown up at his apartment again, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought 2 other men. Martin didn't recognize them, but they looked military types. They didn't threaten Martin directly, just stood there while Dad talked. He told Martin that he knew where everyone was hiding and that if the lies didn't stop, people might start getting hurt in accidents. Martin called the police, but by the time they arrived, the men were gone. The cops said without more specific threats, there wasn't much they could do. That same night, someone broke into Mom's old workplace in Tennessee and destroyed the computer that had her forwarding address for her final paycheck. Coincidence? I fucking think not. Then Monday happened. I was at work when Mandy called me, sobbing. She said there was a man at the school claiming to be her father, trying to check her out early. The school, thank God, followed protocol and called mom first. When mom told them under no circumstances was Mandy to go with that man, they called security. But here's the thing, it wasn't Dad. It was one of the men who'd been with him at Martin's apartment. He had fake ID saying he was Mandy's father, complete with our last name. When security approached him, he claimed there was a family emergency and he was just trying to help his brother get his daughter to the hospital. The school called the police, but the guy was gone before they arrived. The fake ID was good, really good. This wasn't some amateur hour bullshit. Someone paid real money for that documentation. Sarah started shaking when we told her. She said Dad had mentioned having friends who could help with problems, but she'd never seen them before. She thinks he might have connections from his time in the army. He served for 2 years right after high school before he got discharged for disciplinary issues. We've hired private security now. I know how that sounds, like we're being paranoid. But when a man who's been systematically abusing women for years starts showing up with mysterious military-looking guys and fake IDs, paranoid starts feeling like survival. The lawyer says the police investigation is moving forward, but slowly. Apparently, there are now 5 women who've come forward with similar stories about Dad. All young, all from churches where he served. The pattern is consistent: manipulation, isolation, sexual coercion, then threats when they try to leave. Sarah's due in 6 weeks. She's decided to keep the baby, but she's changing her last name and moving to a different state after it's born. She says she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. I don't blame her. Right now, I don't feel safe in my own house. We've changed all the locks, installed an alarm system, and I sleep with a baseball bat next to my bed. My husband's talking about buying a gun. Mom's holding up better than any of us expected. She said knowing the truth about who Dad really is, not just an abuser, but a predator, has somehow made it easier. She's not second-guessing herself anymore. She's not wondering if she could have fixed things or tried harder. She knows now that there was never anything to fix. He's just broken. The divorce should be final in 6 weeks. Mom's asking for nothing except her freedom and Mandy's safety. She doesn't want his money, his property, or anything that ties her to him. She just wants him gone. But I have a feeling this is far from over. Men like him don't just disappear quietly, especially when they're facing prison time. And now we know he has help. I keep thinking about something Sarah said. He always told me that if I ever tried to leave, he'd make sure no one would ever find me. At the time, she thought it was just another manipulation tactic. Update 3. It's been 6 weeks since my last post, and I'm writing this from a hotel room in North Carolina because our house in Florida is currently a crime scene. Sarah had the baby 3 days ago, a little girl she named Hope. Ironic, considering how fucked up everything's gotten. She was in labor for 18 hours, and through it all, she kept saying she was scared Dad would somehow find out and show up at the hospital. We'd registered her under a fake name, but paranoia was eating all of us alive at that point. The baby's healthy, thank God. Sarah's been an absolute wreck emotionally, but she's also been stronger than I ever expected. Watching her hold hope, talking about the life she wants to give her daughter away from all this chaos, it broke my heart and inspired me at the same time. But Dad wasn't done with us. Not even close. 2 weeks ago, Martin called me at 3 a.m., whispering into the phone. He said there were people watching his apartment, different guys this time, sitting in a car across the street for hours. When he tried to get a photo of the license plate, they drove off. But they came back the next night. And the night after that. That's when we decided Martin needed to disappear for a while too. He quit his job, broke his lease, and drove straight to where we were staying. I've never seen my little brother so rattled. He kept checking the mirrors, taking random exits, convinced he was being followed. The police investigation was finally making progress. 5 women had become 8, then 12. The FBI got involved because Dad had apparently crossed state lines multiple times with his victims. Sarah's testimony was crucial. She had kept evidence, emails, photos, even recordings of some of their conversations. The federal prosecutor was confident they had enough to put him away for a very long time. That's probably why he got desperate. Last Monday, I was at work when my phone started buzzing nonstop. First Mom, then my husband, then the security company. Someone had broken into our house in broad daylight, but here's the weird part, they didn't steal anything. Instead, they left things behind. Photos. Hundreds of them, scattered all over our living room floor. Pictures of me leaving work. Pictures of my husband at the grocery store. Pictures of Mandy walking to school. Pictures of Martin at gas stations during his drive to us. Pictures of Mom through the hospital window when she was visiting Sarah after the birth. But the worst ones were of Sarah. Photos taken through the hospital room window of her holding Hope. Close-up shots that someone had to have taken with a telephoto lens from the parking garage across the street. At the bottom of the pile was a single sheet of paper with an address in Tennessee and the words, "Come home. All of you, or the baby disappears first." That's when we knew Dad had completely snapped. This wasn't about getting Mom back anymore. This was about control, about punishing us for exposing him. The FBI moved us into protective custody that same day. But it gets worse. So much worse. While we were packing our emergency bags, Sarah got a call from an unknown number. When she answered, it was a woman claiming to be from Child Protective Services, saying they'd received reports about an unstable mother, and needed to do a welfare check on Hope immediately. Sarah, smart girl, asked for the woman's badge number and said she'd call CPS directly to verify. The woman hung up. When Sarah called the real CPS, they had no record of any reports about her. But they told her something that made my blood run cold. Someone had been calling multiple CPS offices across 3 states, claiming to be Sarah's concerned family member and making detailed reports about her being mentally unstable, drug addicted, and dangerous to her newborn. Dad was trying to get Hope taken away. The FBI agent assigned to our case, Agent Martinez, told us this was a classic pattern for abusers when they're losing control. They escalate to involving children and government agencies. She said Dad probably figured if he couldn't get us back under his thumb, he'd destroy our lives systematically. Agent Martinez also told us something that explained a lot. Dad had been dishonorably discharged from the Army for assaulting a superior officer who'd caught him with a 19-year-old soldier. The disciplinary issues Sarah had mentioned were actually sexual assault charges that got buried through some military bureaucracy bullshit. The men he'd been using weren't current military, they were other discharged soldiers he'd stayed in contact with over the years. We've been in this hotel for 5 days now. Different rooms every night, never staying in the same town twice. Hope is doing well, but Sarah barely sleeps. She keeps checking the locks, jumping at every sound in the hallway. Mandy's been incredible with the baby, and I think taking care of Hope has actually helped her cope with everything. Mom's been talking to a trauma therapist over video calls. Yesterday, we got news that should have been good. Dad was arrested. The FBI raided his house in Tennessee and found a weapons cache that would make a militia jealous, plus detailed surveillance photos of all of us, maps of our movements, and a notebook, with what Agent Martinez called operational planning. But here's the thing that's keeping me awake at night, they only got Dad. The other men, his friends, are still out there. And Agent Martinez said the notebook contained information about us that could only have come from someone on the inside. Someone with access to our protective custody arrangements. Someone had been feeding Dad information about where we were staying. The FBI is investigating their own people now, trying to figure out who leaked our location. In the meantime, we're on our own, moving every few hours, paying cash for everything, using burner phones. This morning, Sarah was feeding Hope when she noticed a car that had been behind us for the past 3 gas stations. Different color, different plates than yesterday, but the same driver. A man in a baseball cap who kept his head turned away whenever we looked back. We're driving through the night now, taking back roads, no destination in mind. Just moving. Hope is sleeping in her car seat, and Sarah is humming lullabies to keep herself calm. Mandy is navigating because she's the only one whose hands aren't shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. I keep thinking about what Sarah said in the hospital. He always told me that if I ever tried to leave, he'd make sure no one would ever find me. I used to think that was just a threat. Now I'm starting to realize it might have been a promise. The scariest part? We've been running for almost a week now, and I'm starting to wonder if there's anywhere far enough away from him. Even locked up, he's still reaching us somehow. Mom asked me today if I regret helping her leave. I told her the truth, I regret that we waited so long. But I don't regret running. I don't regret exposing him. And I sure as hell don't regret protecting Hope from growing up with that monster as a father. I just hope we're fast enough to stay ahead of whatever he's planned next.